Hi. Today we're going to check out what I think is the 10 best albums when it comes to 70s hard rock guitar tone. And we're also going to check out what gear they used to record those albums. In the video description you can find references to this. Feel free to challenge that, because unless you were there you're not totally sure what gear they used. All right, let's go. Kiss' first live album contains some really great Marshall tones. Ace Frehley probably used a 73 Les Paul Deluxe converted to humbuckers. And the pickups may have been T-tops, or he already had started using the DiMarzios. If it was a custom-made pickup or a stock super distortion, I don't know. Paul Stanley used some humbucker-equipped guitar, probably. It's hard to know exactly what they use, since it's mostly recorded in the studio, according to sound engineer Eddie Kramer. According to him, it was only the live stuff from Peter Criss, the drums and his vocals, that were used. But this is challenged by the band. But it makes it harder to know for sure what they used. Then the amps. According to Ace Frehley in an interview, Gene Simmons bought a bunch of Marshalls Super Leads stacks in '73. So they are latest '73. But when you look at pictures, you can see that the cabs have those plastic corners. So they are probably '73 Super Leads, and probably Mark I. When it comes to speakers, then it was most likely greenbacks, but they probably blew the speakers all the time, so it could be updated. Live was released in '75, so it could have been creambacks or blackbacks as well. It sure sounds like G12M. Initially I thought it was G12H, because G12M sounds really muddy at low volume. You have to really crank those to get the tone of a live one. Sorry, a bit of Swedish there. And the tubes they used were probably the stock American 6550 tubes, and that's what can be seen in various pictures where you can see the amps with an open back. The first album of Led Zeppelin contains some great and unique Telecaster tones. Jimmy Page used a 1966 Telecaster into a Supro amp. Allegedly it was a Coronado, but the baffle had been replaced from 210 to 112 instead. And it's suggested that he used a British voiced speaker, like a Celestion Greenback, for instance. And if you check out the homepage of Scumbag Speakers, they suggested that it may be a G12H 3075 Hertz speaker. But I don't know. To me it sounds more like an American voice speaker. But when Supro now has reissued the amp, which recreates Jimmy Page amp, the Black Magic, it's a British voiced speaker in it. Another important part of Jimmy's sound is the tone bender, the fuzz pedal. Whether used on the album or not, I have no definite references for, but he sure used it a lot live, and it sure sounds like one. Back in Black by AC/DC contains some great, aggressive but yet smooth guitar tracks. And when it comes to AC/DC, the ultimate resource for information is Solo Dallas, both his YouTube channel and his website. And from that I've learned that Angus used an SG into a super lead on the title track. And the cab was likely a straight 1960B Marshall 4x12 cab with G12 65 speakers. And he most likely used the Schaffer Vega system as well. When it comes to Malcolm Young, live he uses often the Gretsch Jet Firebird with super bass and super leads. But I have no definite reference to what he used on that album. Paranoid by Black Sabbath is a great classic album. Tony Iommi used a 1965 Gibson SG Special. The bridge pickup is a P90, but it has been encased in metal. And the neck pickup is a John Birch custom-made pickup. Tony Iommi mentioned in an interview that he used all knobs on full on the amp, but bass that is 0. And the amp is a Laney supergroup. In the cabs to the Laney, there is no definite references to what speakers he used, but it sure sounds like Celestian greenbacks. So it's either the G12M 25 75 Hertz or the G12H 30 75 Hertz. And for pedals, the Dallas Range Master was an integral part of Tony's sound. He probably used that on the album as well. Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses has a great mid-heavy, detailed, percussive and aggressive guitar sound. And it still doesn't sound harsh. So it's extremely difficult to recreate this sound. And neither the band nor the production team has any clear recollection on what was used on those songs. Slash did mostly use Les Pauls with the 80 Seymour Duncan all Nico 2 pickups in them. And the amp, although a number of amps have been suggested, the most likely one is the Sir Rental number 39, which is a super tremolo from latest 1973. But that amp was modded with, among other things, an extra gain stage using the tremolo tube. When it comes to speakers, Slash is known for using vintage 30, but that speaker was introduced around the same time that the album was recorded, so it's unlikely he used those. On Forus, it has been suggested that he used G1280s. I think blackbacks, G12M blackbacks, lead blackbacks, sounds very much like it as well. But it's very hard to say. I have no definite references to Izzy Stradlin though. It has been suggested that he used Mesa Boogies on that album though. Rising by Rainbow. Richie Blackmore used a 1974 Fender Stratocaster with a maple neck on that album. In a 1978 interview with the Guitar Player magazine, he said that he used his modded Marshall 6-knob Major on the albums as well. It's been modded with an extra gain stage, for instance, and he used that with two Marshall cabs with G12H 30 55 Hertz speakers. So it's well over, fully saturated, it's well over 300 watts into 240 watt speakers. So he blew speakers and output transformers all the time. And throughout the 70s, Richie Blackmore often used various sorts of treble boosters. And he also connected the guitar to a tape machine. You could see that with the two rolls on stage, which he then connected to the amp to control the distortion and the gain structure using that, the preamp of the tape machine. But Richie is a humorous guy, so in interviews it's not always clear if he means what he says. Second Helping by Lynyrd Skynyrd. On the Sweet Home Alabama track, Ed King plays a 1973 Strat. And in interviews he has pointed out how lousy that guitar was, which I think is kind of interesting because it's probably the most iconic Fender Strat riff of all time. And it's played on a lousy guitar. So a lot of it is in the fingers. The other guys, Alan Collins, played the Firebird on that record. And Gary Rossington played either his 59 Les Paul or his 61 SG. They played, according to the sound engineer, into Marshalls 1959T, Super Tremolos from 1973. And according to the sound engineer, Ed King played into a Fender Twin amp. But according to Ed himself, he borrowed Alan Collins' Marshall for that song. Lynyrd Skynyrd is usually associated with the PV Mace amps, but I haven't found any references for use of that amp on this album. And the speakers were most likely the Marshall stock speakers, the greenbacks. They use a lot of JBL D120, but that probably came later. Bark at the Moon by Ozzy Osbourne. J.K. Lee used the 1977 Marshall 2203, the master volume 100-watt head. I got that reference from his webpage, but when I checked it now, it was down. So it's a bit, that reference is a bit unsure. Unfortunately, Ozzy has re-recorded the guitars and bass as well, I think. That is certainly unfortunate, since I think it's of historical value. J.K. Lee's playing on that album. Tattoo You by Rolling Stones has one of the greatest clean Telecaster guitar sounds to me. This album was actually the leftovers from a number of 70s Stones albums that was gathered for this album. Regarding the title track, in an interview published on Sound on Sound, engineer Chris Kimsey remembers that Keith and Ron used Mesa Boogie Mark I amps for Start Me Up. Keith used Telecaster and Les Paul Jr. And Ron used Strat and Telecaster. Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix? And here there are lots of different opinions on what he used on different songs. So this is very unclear. I have no good references for this. But there are books on the subject. For instance, Roger Mayer, who built Jimmy's pedals, is one of the authors in one of the books. But what I have heard, and you need to take this with a grain of salt, is that on Hey Joe, he used Fender Twin Blackface. On The Wind Cries Mary, he used the Marshall Super Bass. And on Foxy Lady, he used the Fender Dual Showman stack. But feel free to challenge me on that, because I have some very questionable references for that. All right. Now I want to know, which albums do you think I missed? Because I think it would be interesting to expand what kind of tones we try to recreate here on the channel. These 10 albums has been a great influence on me. So now I want to know, what more albums should I have a look at? Cheers.